So we know that the transfer window is officially open. You can stay up to date with all the latest rumours and news and goings-on over on our Transfer Talk page on the website, espn.com. But transfer windows weren't always around back in the day that these guys were playing. There was no such thing as a transfer window. However, two of them did still make moves in January. As coincidence would have it, Nedum has also done the same when a transfer window was in place. So we decided to get some of your experiences today on what it is like to move in January. Stevie, starting with you, and you went to Notts County as a player/assistant manager.
I did. Well, I wasn't in the Liverpool side, and I was barely travelling. And I just got a phone call out of the blue from Howard Kendall, who at one stage was looked upon as one of the best managers in European football. Had Everton as one of the best teams in European football, and called me and asked me to go to Notts County and play, but coach as well. And he also said to me, what I'll do with you is, whenever we make any transfers, whenever we do any business, I want you there to learn how it works. So that in the future, you either take over from me or you go somewhere else, and it gets you on the ladder, which is at the time what I thought I wanted to do. So that's why I took up the position as player coach, and as I said, I sat in on all the dealings, all the transfers, all the strange haggling. I mean, I could sit here all night and tell you how weird is sitting listening to two grown men trying to buy one buying a player and one selling a player, and sitting there for 40 minutes, and they probably spoke about the deal for about 20 seconds of the 40 minutes. And I was sitting there right in the middle of the two of them. It was David Plate and Howard Kendall. And they were sitting talking about everything other than that. And then one of them would go, what about 50? And then the other one would answer with, yeah, is that a bottle of red you're drinking? And I sat there for 40 minutes.
Wait for that.
I sat there for 40 minutes thinking, what's going on here? Why don't you just sort it out? It would take 10 minutes.
So when he became a coach, he did exactly that.
Oh, I absolutely did not.
He learned from that. But Stevie, you had been at Liverpool for years before that. Yeah. You'd won everything there was to win. You'd been in this amazing team. Was it a little bit depressing?
No.
No.
Time was up. As I said, I wasn't even travelling at times. So, look, the one thing about Liverpool, when your time's up, you can smell it, you know it, and you go. You don't hang around.
Yeah, nobody wants to be that last person at the party, do they?
No.
Talking about depressing, your move in January, when I heard...
You're talking about Robbo.
No, I tell you.
I know, I'm a depressive sort of character.
Wait till you hear the story behind Robbo's move in January.
So I'll try and keep it as brief as possible. So the previous season, 86, I'd been Arsenal's Player of the Year. I was going to go to the World Cup in 86. Bobby Robson had told me that, and I missed the last 7 or 8 games. So he couldn't take me. Steve Hodge had played against Scotland and scored, so he took Steve Hodge instead. Then George Graham, I worked under Terry Neal, Don Howe and John Cartwright, coaches I really loved. Then George Graham took over. And when I came back for pre-season, the injury was still there. And I played the first 4 games. He made me vice-captain. I played the first 4 games, didn't play particularly well, but was still picked for England. Went away with England to play against Sweden and was sub. Fortunately, and I was so fortunate, I didn't get on because the groin was really causing me a problem. Went back to George Graham and said, I need something doing. This isn't right. And he said to me, looks as though you've put England before Arsenal. At which I said, last year I pulled out 4 England squads, so I was fit for Arsenal. So when you weren't here, so don't talk to me about that. It was then proved I needed a double hernia. Went and had the operation. And while I was in hospital, waiting to come out and get myself fit, I saw in the back of the Sunday Mail, Everton, who you were talking about, top of the league, best team in the made a bid for me. And then the next day it was West Ham have made a bid. So I thought, well, what's going on here?
You learned that in the paper?
I learned that in the paper while I was in hospital. So I come out and I'll go to George Graham and he said, well, I don't know what it's all about. Then on New Year's Eve, and I'd had 2 weeks of training and I'm just about to be fit again. George Graham phones me on New Year's Eve and says, I've had a phone call off John Lyle. He's willing to pay this amount of money for you. I think it's a good deal for us and it's a good deal for you. Why don't you go and have a chat with him?
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. So I went and met him, didn't sign, went back to see George Graham and said, what about Everton? Because he said, well, you can't go there because they're top of the table. So I said, well, I'd like to go to Everton. He said, you can't go there. So I said, OK. Listened to what he had to say, spoke to my dad and he went, you can't play for him. So I went to West Ham. And I went on, I think, January the 3rd or 4th.
How did you feel?
Well, it was a major shock because at the time, as I say, I was Arsenal's player of the year. I was in the England squad, and suddenly this new manager comes in, and we have a row. And his first thing that he wanted to do was say, "Okay, get rid of him." And again, it was after an injury, so I wasn't too pleased. So when we were talking the other day about, do you look at your old team's results and think, let's hope they do well? At the time, the worst thing that ever happened to me was, and I think you might have been playing, Mickey Thomas runs through and makes Arsenal win the title against Liverpool. That was the worst thing that could have happened.
Yeah, the Neil Maupay of the 80s back then. Stewart Robson, checking it out on the back page of the Mail. Well, seeing as though we're on a depressing theme and January is usually a dreary month,
we've gone to the right place,
we've saved the best for last. Let us take you back to January 2012.
Oh, where do I begin? So let me start off by saying this, okay? So I think things differently now, but at the time, you know, I'd come from Man City's academy, raised in Manchester, Man City supporter. So playing for City was my dream. I didn't know anything else, but apart from that, you know, I was so happy to be playing. I'd played under Kevin Keegan, Stuart Pearce, Roberto Mancini, Sven-Göran Eriksson, and then all of a sudden, here comes Roberto Mancini, and I'm out. I'm so out. I'm so irrelevant. I'm training with the under-18s. And for other people in the team, you know, you're looking at the likes of Adebayor, Wayne Bridges and so on. You know, this was part of their journey. They just happened to be there and they were prepared to go anywhere else. But for me, I didn't want to leave. I kept thinking, I'll be able to force this manager to play me. I'll train as hard as I can, as hard as I can, as hard as I can. Obviously, that got a bit tricky when all of a sudden I was training at 3 and the first team were training at 10, so he couldn't really see me anymore. But still, I thought, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And then the first window came in August, and it was QPR that were in for me. But I thought, this doesn't feel right. It's not the right place to go. You know, I wanted to try and force my way into the team, so I didn't leave in that first window. And then from August through to December, I played in 3 League Cup games, and I played in 1 league game for City that season, just 1. And it just so happened to be the one before I was sold. But in terms of being sold, again, I thought, I'll prove him wrong, I'll prove him wrong. And then one day I got a call saying, well, you know, the club have accepted a bid from Queen's Park Rangers. And I was like, okay, so what does that mean? And they say, you need to get on the train and go right down to London now. And all of a sudden, my world is like changing completely. It was never my intention to leave. But now, not only am I leaving, at this point, I'm like a proper diehard Northerner as well. I hated the South. I thought, there's no way I want to go down to London. No way I want to do that. Went down, did the negotiations. 24 hours later, I'm training at QPR's training ground, which is one of the oldest, dustiest training grounds ever at the time. They've changed it now, thankfully. But all of a sudden, yeah, I'm a QPR player. Didn't know any of the players, didn't know anything about travelling around London. And all the while, what really made it a little bit tricky for me was, again, say I didn't want to leave, but just before I left, I was told by an agent that Everton were interested as well. But the only way that move would happen, because it was going to be a potential for a loan with a chance of a permanent. And somehow I don't know whether that was going to be true or not, but they said to get it done, you have to go to one of the directors at City and say you would like to do this. And for me, again, at the time, because, you know, I played 200 odd games for QPR, you had some great memories there. But at the time, I didn't want to go south. So I went into the director and said, is this true? Because if it's true, I'd like to do that. He looked me in the eye and said, no, it's not true. And you've got to go to QPR. As the years went on, I found out it was true. And he lied to my face, but they wanted to get me off the books. And as a consequence, I went down there. They wiped their hands of me. And then I'll be honest, for as much as I'm a City supporter, it was very hard to support City under Mancini, because I know he was the guy that changed my life, and he changed it in a way whereby there was real resentment, because I felt I was good enough to be there, but instead he'd taken me away from my home.
Oh, Nathan.
That's exactly what we're talking about. When you usually leave a club for a reason.
Right.
Stevie left it because he knew it was time, but he didn't dislike the club because they hadn't treated him badly. Yep. Nedum thinks the club have treated him badly, or Mancini has treated him badly, and he's absolutely right. And I felt that George Graham had treated me badly. That's why, for the next year, 2 years, you don't want that team to keep winning.
It feels weird to support them. But, Nedum, and then the fact that, obviously, the Everton thing you didn't know at the time, you weren't told the truth there. And I know, obviously, you were Man City through and through. Was there ever a way you could have kicked up a fuss and refused that move to QPR?
Yeah, I absolutely could have done, but this is the thing that makes it even more interesting. The last manager before Roberto Mancini took over at Man City was Mark Hughes, and he was one of my favourite managers, and I played in his last game before he lost his job. And guess who was the manager at QPR in the second half of that season? It was Mark Hughes. So it was a familiar face that was saying, come down here, and this is what I have planned for you. This is somebody who I trusted, someone who I played some of my best football under. So that was the draw. And also listening to people around me who were telling me about this, because I'd only played 3-4 games that season. I'd been fit for the first half of the season, was barely playing. And somebody reminded me, and this is a great thing which I say to people, like, you never know how long your career is going to last. So you can never afford to waste the season. So I was like, well, I have to do this. This is the right thing to do from a career perspective. From the inner fan within me and stuff like that, I absolutely did not want to do it. But again, it was the right decision. I've ended up playing, as I say, over 200 games for them. And like, it's a career, even though there were times when we got relegated, you know, we played in the Championship, which was never something I'd done prior to that point. The fact is you ended up playing years of this sport, which, you know, so many people would give anything to be able to do. But yeah, I couldn't turn it down. If I was in a stronger position, maybe I could have. But the other option was I either go to QPR or I sit and I watch the first team play every Saturday and have no part to do with it. And for me, that wasn't going to be sustainable.
When did the resentment go away, Nedum? I'm not going to ask Robbo because we know it still hasn't.
Do you know, for me, the irony behind it is, like, for the game in 2012 where Aguero scores the goal, you know, it's one of the most iconic games in Premier League history and so on. A lot of people who I know who are City fans, they think that I was celebrating as that goal went in. But for me, the biggest thing was making sure that I stayed in the league that day. And I was so happy for my teammates and so happy for my friends who were playing for Man City. So happy for some of the staff who'd been at City for so many years. We'd seen so many lows, you know, like when we didn't score a goal at home for 4 months, you know, 2 years earlier. But in terms of Mancini, like, again, I could meet him now and maybe things are all right. But I resented him so much. And I always try and make this point, which is a little bit toxic. If you want to know how good a manager he was, look at the 15 minutes before they scored their second and third goals, because he's on the sideline telling every Man City player how bad they are. Those were his go-to tactics in the biggest moments when his back was against the wall. So yeah, there was a sense of resentment towards that. And then obviously them losing in the FA Cup final to Wigan, I think possibly the year later, that was tough. That was really, really tough, because I didn't want them to lose, because these are my friends. You know, talking about Joe Hart's, Michael Richards, Joleon Lescott's, to name but a few. James Milner's, for example. But the fact is, as soon as he left, it felt more normal. And then, to be honest, as soon as I left the country in 2018, that's when it started to feel more like it did when I was a child. And to this day now, this feels a lot more like from before I was playing as well.
Yeah, definitely not let that one go on Mancini. I will, of course, ask you. I was kidding. When did the resentment go away, Robbo?
When George Graham left. Yeah, because, as I say, at the time, everything was going well at Arsenal for me, you know, and as I said, Player of the Year. I was just got into the England squad as a young I was 23, but I'd been in England squads before, but this was the one, you know, where it was going to all take off. And I still don't, to this day, know why he did that. And he even went on a podcast. And the other thing he did, George Graham, which he said I couldn't sign the papers at West Ham until 6 o'clock at night. We didn't know why that was. The reason was he could get to the newspapers and put his story out in all the newspapers, because the Arsenal fans went mad when I was sold. And he put out, his words were, I tried everything to keep him. I offered him the best contract any Arsenal player has been offered.
Wow.
You know, in history. These are the things he said at the time. And I just couldn't keep him. He wanted to go to West Ham, his boyhood club, which it wasn't my boyhood club at all. So when I had the chance, when the papers came back to me to answer back, too late. He's got the first. You know, he's got him first.
Well, now everybody knows. Yeah. You've told the whole of America the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.